Texas, 1943. A young German soldier stood beneath the scorching sun, sweat burning his eyes. Heino Erichsen was 19 years old. He expected torture. He expected starvation. He expected something worse than death, because that was what Wehrmacht officers had taught him. They said, "If you fall into American hands, you will beg for the end." But instead of torture, he encountered something that shattered his world more deeply than any bullet could. He entered the home of people from whom the war had already taken the most precious thing. He looked into the eyes of a mother whose son had been killed by a German bullet, and he waited for hatred. What happened on that farm will not be found in most history textbooks. 5 words spoken by a grieving father would follow Heino for the rest of his life. First people, then prisoners. Today, we travel to the very heart of 1940s America to uncover one of the most remarkable and deeply human stories of the Second World War. This is not a story about generals or strategies. It is about what happens when an enemy becomes the only person who can understand your pain. Heino Erichsen had been a soldier of the legendary Afrika Korps, hardened by the desert, loyal to his oath, and yet, inside, just a young man who dreamed not of killing, but of baking bread. When he was captured in Tunisia, he believed his life was over. He was shipped across the ocean to Camp Hearne, Texas, a place prisoners nicknamed the Fritz Ritz because of its surprisingly good conditions. But behind the facade of decent meals and organized sports lurked a deadly danger. Fanatical Nazis inside the camp murdered fellow prisoners for the slightest doubt about Hitler. To survive, Heino needed distance from them. He volunteered to work on a local farm. He believed he had escaped the war. Instead, on that farm, he encountered a far more difficult battlefield, a battle with conscience, grief, and the quiet suffering of a family who had lost their son. It began in the sands of North Africa. May 1943. Rommel's once formidable army was defeated. Heino Erichsen raised his hands in surrender. In his mind echoed Nazi propaganda. "Americans are gangsters. You will be sold into slavery." They were loaded onto ships. The holds were crammed with men like sardines. The air was thick with diesel fumes and fear. Yet the greatest threat was not the Americans. It was the Atlantic. German submarines prowled the ocean, capable of torpedoing their own countrymen without ever knowing. But no torpedo came. Something else did. When they arrived in New York, Heino froze. Europe lay in darkness under strict blackout orders. Here, skyscrapers glowed like Christmas trees. Billboards blazed with life. In that moment, something shifted in his mind. We were lied to, he realized. If America possessed enough energy to illuminate its cities during wartime, how could Germany possibly hope to win? This was not propaganda. It was reality. They were transported to Texas in comfortable rail cars. Accustomed to rationed ersatz food, Heino could hardly believe it when a railway attendant brought him a hot meal. But an even greater shock awaited him. Camp Hearne was built in accordance with the Geneva Conventions. Heino expected hard labor. Instead, he found beer, meat, and soccer matches. The prisoners even built a theater and an orchestra, but it was a gilded cage with venomous snakes inside. The camp was dominated by committed Nazis who established secret tribunals known as Gerichte. Anyone who spoke English too fluently or doubted Hitler's victory could be found beaten to death by morning. After the brutal murder of Corporal Hugo Kraus, bludgeoned by fellow prisoners for criticizing the regime, Heino understood that staying inside the camp was more dangerous than facing the unknown. He needed to leave, not to escape, but simply to survive. An opportunity arose. America was short of farm labor. With men overseas, farmers desperately needed help. Heino, who knew some English, volunteered. He was assigned to a small farm not far from the camp. The farm belonged to an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. They were quiet. Too quiet. For the first few days, Heino kept his eyes lowered. He wore the letters PW on his back. He expected insults, perhaps worse. Instead, the Harrisons handed him tools, water, and simple instructions. One afternoon, sheltering from the rain, he stepped inside the house. On the mantel stood a framed photograph. A young man, about Heino's age, smiling in the uniform of the United States Army. Heino felt a surge of anger. The enemy, he thought. Perhaps this young man had fired upon his comrades. Perhaps he had helped bomb his hometown of Kiel. Then Mrs. Harrison entered the room. She did not see Heino's anger. She saw only the photograph. She adjusted the frame and quietly wiped away a tear.
"That's our Bill,"
Mr. Harrison said softly from the doorway.
"He was killed in Normandy 2 months ago."
In that instant, Heino's world shifted. He no longer saw a uniform. He saw a son who would never come home. He looked at his own hands, the hands of a Wehrmacht soldier, and understood that to these people he must represent the very force that had taken their child. He expected to be sent away. Instead, Mrs. Harrison looked at him, not with hatred, but with exhaustion.
"Sit down, son,"
she said gently.
"The soup will get cold."
She did not call him Fritz. She did not call him prisoner. She called him son. That evening, Heino ate bread baked by the mother of a fallen American soldier, and something inside him changed. They did not see a Nazi. They saw a young man far from home, just like Bill had once been. From that day forward, Heino worked not out of fear, nor for wages. He worked as if trying to fill the emptiness their son had left behind. "They lost a son because of men like me," he would later write. "Yet they gave me shelter and food. It was a lesson I could never forget." The war ended. For the world, it was a celebration. For prisoners, it was the beginning of uncertainty. In the spring of 1946, Heino returned to Germany. His hometown of Kiel lay in ruins. His family lived in a basement. Food was scarce. The irony was bitter. In captivity in Texas, he had been well fed. At home, among his own people, he faced hunger. Yet Texas did not release him. He exchanged letters with the Harrisons, the very family who had lost their son in the war. They did not forget the young German who had worked their fields. Their support and sponsorship made the impossible possible. In 1953, Heino Erichsen returned to America, not as a prisoner, but as an immigrant. Those who had every reason to hate him helped him begin again. Heino lived a long life in Texas. He became a citizen of the country that had once held him behind barbed wire. He often said, "Wars are started by politicians, but they are ended by people." That moment in the farmhouse, when a grieving mother served soup to her enemy, became his symbol of true victory, humanity over hatred. Heino passed away in 2018, but his story remains a reminder that even when the world descends into madness, we still have a choice: to remain enemies or to remain human.